Hey everyone, welcome to This Explainer. Have you ever actually paused to think about what keeps the massive, unbelievably complex machinery of government from just running right over our daily lives? I mean, we interact with the state constantly, yet most of us never even see the legal mechanisms holding it accountable. So today, we're going to explore the invisible shield that protects you from government overreach.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the rise of the welfare state, look at what administrative law actually is, map out its constitutional blueprint, and finally, we'll unpack two massive legal pillars, the separation of powers and the rule of law.
Starting off with Section 1, the rise of the welfare state, or as I like to call it, the shift from kings to bureaucrats.
To really grasp why we even need this specific type of law today, we first have to understand how state power has completely shape-shifted over human history. In the ancient and medieval eras, we basically lived under a police state. Kings and rulers exercised power directly based on customs or religious commands with very few, if any, legal limits on what they could do. But then the 19th century Industrial Revolution hit. Suddenly, society became incredibly complex. We desperately needed regulations for factory conditions, public health, and labor. Fast forward to the modern era, and we see the birth of the true welfare state. The government isn't just keeping the peace anymore, right? It has transformed into an entity that actively manages technical, social, and economic development.
Just think about the sheer scope of modern government for a second. Telecom, healthcare, transportation, the environment, taxation, education, social welfare. The modern government regulates almost every single aspect of your daily routine. Literally, every time you turn on a tap, take a train, check your phone bill, or send your kids to school, you are interacting with complex systems heavily managed by administrative agencies.
So, that naturally brings up a massive, honestly kind of scary question. With the government having so much absolute power over the intricate details of our lives, what exactly stops them from abusing it? If a government agency manages everything from our taxes to our transport, what keeps that immense, concentrated power in check?
And that brings us to Section 2. What is administrative law? Basically, the rulebook.
By definition, administrative law is the branch of public law that governs the powers of administrative authorities, ensuring they act fairly, legally, and reasonably. In plain English, this is the hard legal mechanism guaranteeing that public agencies can't just do whatever they feel like. It forces them to operate within strict, defined boundaries and holds them accountable to the public they serve.
The famous jurist A.V. Dicey actually hit the nail on the head here. He noted, administrative law determines the powers of administrative authorities and the remedies available to citizens against administrative actions. So the absolutely crucial point to take away is that this law has a dual nature. It's not just a tool for controlling the government's power, it is equally about offering concrete, actionable remedies to everyday citizens when the government oversteps its bounds.
Moving right along to Section 3, the constitutional blueprint.
To make sense of how this all fits together, think of constitutional law as the grand blueprint of a house, or you can think of it as the parent. It is broad, it's fundamental, and it deals with the very structure of the state. Administrative law, on the other hand, is highly detailed and functional. It deals with the actual day-to-day functioning of the administration. So if the Constitution is the structural blueprint, administrative law is the day-to-day plumbing. And obviously, you can't live in a house without both. Administrative law derives its life and authority from the Constitution, but it handles the highly practical, granular details of governance.
A really great way to ground this concept is by looking at historical context. For example, let's look at the landmark Indian case of Ram Jawaya Kapoor. This case involved the state taking over the textbook publishing business from private individuals. And because of that, the courts had to practically define where the broad constitutional blueprint ends and where the specific actions of administrative power begin. It perfectly illustrates exactly how the courts step in to clarify the scope of executive power under the Constitution.
All right, Section 4, separation of powers.
The philosopher Montesquieu argued centuries ago that if you put all the power of the state into one set of hands, tyranny is pretty much guaranteed. To protect ourselves from that, we divide the government into three separate, distinct organs. First, the legislature makes the laws. Second, the executive implements those laws. And third, the judiciary interprets the laws and administers justice. By splitting these three functions up, we prevent a dangerous concentration of power and fiercely protect individual liberty.
Now, what's genuinely fascinating here is that, unlike some countries that attempt to build an incredibly rigid, impenetrable wall between these branches, India actually follows functional separation and a robust system of checks and balances.
It's not a strict, absolute separation. The branches actually oversee each other. The judiciary reviews the laws the legislature makes, the executive participates in legislation, and the legislature exercises oversight over the executive. It's an entire ecosystem designed to keep everyone honest.
And the courts have fiercely defended this delicate balance. In pivotal cases like Kesavananda Bharti, which established the famous basic structure doctrine of the Constitution, and Indira Nehru Gandhi versus Raj Narayan, the judiciary cemented the separation of powers. Even more importantly, they cemented their own power of judicial review as an unshakable foundational part of the constitutional structure. These cases fundamentally proved that you cannot simply legislate away the court's ability to check the government's power.
Which brings us to our final major pillar. Section 5, the rule of law.
The rule of law is literally the bedrock of democratic governance. It quite simply means no person is above the law, and the government itself must act according to the law. This doctrine strictly opposes arbitrary power, absolute authority, and uncontrolled discretion by the state. The rules apply to the rule makers just as much as they apply to you and me.
Let's break down AIBE Dicey's 3 elements to see how this actually works in practice. First up, supremacy of law. The government must act according to established laws, not arbitrary will. Second, equality before law. Absolutely everyone is equally subject to the ordinary law of the land with zero special privileges for the rich or powerful. And third, protection of rights, ensuring that citizen rights are actually protected and enforced through independent courts. This 3-step formula is the core of what guarantees fairness for every citizen.
But hey, let's be realistic for a second. Running a massive modern welfare state is unbelievably complicated. It requires flexible tools to function efficiently. That's why we have things like administrative discretion, delegated legislation, where agencies are actually given power to make specific rules, and specialized tribunals to handle really complex technical disputes like taxation or environmental issues. Now, these act as modern challenges, or let's say necessary exceptions, to a strict, rigid rule of law. But importantly, to maintain fairness, all of these flexible tools must remain subject to judicial review.
And when the government gets that balance wrong, well, that's exactly when the courts are meant to step in. A massive climax in this legal evolution was the landmark case of Maneka Gandhi versus the Union of India. Seriously, I cannot overstate how huge this was. In this case, which started when the government arbitrarily confiscated a citizen's passport, the Supreme Court massively expanded the concept of procedural fairness. They ruled that administrative actions can't just follow the technical letter of the law. The procedure itself must be fair, just, and reasonable. It forced a profound new level of accountability on the entire administrative state.
But, we also have to remember that this hasn't always been some smooth upward trajectory. Take the case of ADM Jabalpur, for instance. This case represents a crucial, heavily debated moment regarding the suspension of fundamental rights and liberty during the emergency period in India. It serves as a stark historical reminder of the immense stakes involved when the state's power clashes with individual liberty, and exactly why constant, unwavering vigilance is required to uphold the rule of law.
So this leaves us with a final, really vital question to chew on. The modern state's reach into our lives is only getting wider and deeper. If administrative law truly is the invisible shield protecting our daily freedoms, how actively are we ensuring it stays strong in the face of an ever-expanding government? Understanding the rules is a crucial first step, for sure, but holding power in check requires all of us to stay informed and actually pay attention. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the world around you.